Yeah, like Jason said, I'm Dave Hoff. I've been with BHIS for about 3.5 years now. Um, and I wanted to spend some time focusing on using Elastic, right? There's a ton of training material out there. If you are building a cluster or designing your data setup and your indices and everything, but there's not much material for the analyst or the CISO or anybody who needs to log into Kibana and just work with it, look at the data and do their job using Kibana, right? So that's the focus of this and possibly of future webcasts and classes. I think there's a lot of material to cover. We obviously are not going to be able to cover everything today, but here's a quick agenda. We're going to start off with covering Discover and KQL, basically how you search your data. Visualizations and editors, how you can summarize your data into colorful graphs and charts. Uh, Buckets versus metrics, which is something, if you've been around Elastic for a while, you've probably heard those terms. They're important when you're making visualizations. So we're going to talk about what they are and how they work together to create your charts. Lastly, we'll cover dashboards and URL templating. So that last category there, URL templating, not sure how much time we're going to have for it, and it's a fairly advanced usage scenario, but it's something that I don't see many teams using, and I think it can hold a lot of benefit for a lot of people. So if you are brand new to Elastic, um, follow along as best you can. The first 4 bullet points are for you, and the URL templating is here to give us something for people who might have been using Kibana for a while, or the Elastic Stack in general, and are looking to up their game. First off, Discover, searching your data. This is the easiest place to view individual logs. It gives you full flexibility to search, filter, and you can save your searches and recall them for later use. So these can be put into dashboards, but Discover is kind of the primary way you look for data to start off with. Um, we're going to do a bunch of demos throughout the cast today. But I've got some screenshots in here to help explain things before we switch over to a demo. Um, so this is the Discover interface in Kibana. On the left-hand side here, you've got your list of fields from your data. These are the individual data points under each document. You've got a query bar where you can enter your searches. And we'll talk about KQL and how to find the data you're looking for. The time picker on the right-hand side is going to set the window for how long or what data you're looking at. And then lastly, the data table. This is where the actual individual logs are. You can expand them um, and look into those individually. So starting off this fields menu, there's one really important tidbit that everyone should know and a lot of people forget. This shows an overview of the field's values if you click on one of these fields, and we'll show this in the demo, but it uses a sample of the logs that you're showing in Discover, right? So you might have a search that returns millions of results, and it's only going to use 10 or 20,000 of those to calculate these top values. That means in larger data sets, you quite often will get a sample that's not necessarily representative of the full amount of data you're looking at. And we'll cover how to open up a visualization and get more accurate counts. But just be careful when you're looking in here. It's great for a quick glance, but if you're making decisions based on these numbers, there are more accurate ways to pull the same information. The time picker on the right-hand side allows you to select, like I said, the window of time that you're looking at. You've got commonly used and recently used date ranges. The commonly used are configured in the Kibana advanced settings. If you have a use for a time window that's not here, but you use often, or you can click in the screenshot where it says 14 days ago and now to set the beginning and ending points, either relative or absolute. And then we've got the data table. So you can add fields as columns in this table, either from the fields menu on the left-hand side that we showed earlier, or by expanding the full log. And you can reorder columns, you can resize the columns, whatever you need to do, and all of that will be saved when you save the search, right? So even if you don't have necessarily a specific query that you're saving, sometimes it's still worth it to save a search with an empty query so that you have your data table laid out the way you like it, showing the data that you need for certain tasks. So let's go ahead and we'll give a quick demo here just of the Discover interface before we go into searching. This is the fields menu on the left-hand side. Like I said, it's going to show some popular fields that you've used before. This is a lab environment. There's only one VM reporting to it, so there's not a ton of data to work with here, but it should allow us to kind of show off how Kibana works. With any of these fields, if you click on it, it's going to give you this pop-out. This is what I was talking about. In this case, since we have very little data, it's using actually more records than we returned with our query, but generally this is going to be significantly less, and that's when you get those non-representative samples. If you click Visualize here, it'll open up a lens visualization, and you can select accuracy mode, which we'll go over when we start doing visualizations. But by going into a dedicated visualization, you can get those accurate counts if you're making decisions based on the data. The plus symbol next to the field here is going to add it as a column in your table. You can add as many columns as you can fit on the screen. And this button on the left will pop open the view of that one specific log, right? So we've got a bunch of different fields with a bunch of different values. You can add any of them to the table, and you can also filter for the value, filter it out, or filter for that field being present, right? So if I click the plus symbol here, it is going to give me a filter up here and limit my results to only results that match this filter. It's a little bit quick and easy compared to writing your own query sometimes, especially if you discover something that you want to see more of, right? And then the time picker over on the right here, like I said, you get your commonly used time periods, or you can select it and set. Most of the time we're doing relative timestamps, but you do have the option to set absolute times if you prefer. And then when you click the green button, it'll load up your search, and you can start digging into your logs. So with that, we're going to jump into querying your data, right? There are technically two different query languages in Kibana, KQL and Lucene, at least as far as Discover is concerned. Lucene, you probably won't need. KQL covers almost every scenario that most of us in the security field are going into, at least as far as basic searches, right? When you get into creating alerts and detects, then you'll start to branch into EQL. There's quite a few different query languages, but when you're starting off, KQL is the one you need. It's going to get you a long ways and do what you need it to do. The basic syntax is field : value. And then I've got a couple of notes here. You can search for just a value. If you do that, it's going to search a predefined set of fields for most data, right? And if you're not real comfortable and familiar with Elastic, it can be difficult to figure out what those fields are or why your search isn't returning the data that you expect it to. So I've got this setting highlighted in bold here for anybody that wants to go looking for it, but just know if you're searching without a field name, you may not be hitting the field you expect to hit with your query. So I recommend always including a field name if possible. It's going to perform a lot better, and it's going to give consistent results. You should know what you're getting. Of course, as with most search languages, we get our basic and, or, not, and we can use parentheses to denote order of operations, right? Wildcards also work on most fields. If they're mapped as a number, I don't think you can use them. But in security, most of our fields are mapped as keywords, so wildcards work just fine with them. In this first example, I'm using datastream.dataset. That's how we split up our data into the different log sources. And event code 4688, we're looking for process start events. This is a pretty basic query. The one right below it is very similar, but it's using parentheses to denote order of operations within the query. So it can be a little bit confusing. If there were no parentheses in the second query here, whether the and or the or gets evaluated first is not inherently clear to the user, right? And theoretically, it should always do the same thing, but it's difficult to know what to expect in those scenarios. So My rule of thumb is anytime you're using an or statement in combination with anything else, you should probably be using parentheses to force the query to behave the way you expect it to behave. And then in the last example here, I want to highlight process.command line colon asterisk, right? This is going to do an exists query. So in Elastic, both trailing wildcards like we have in the first example and solo wildcards like we have in the last example perform very, very well. In some languages, those can incur performance hits, but in Elastic, they're almost free, right? But if you put that asterisk at the beginning of a term, you can run into trouble, right? It has to do with how Elastic evaluates terms, and it can end up with very slow queries. You can't always get around that, but that's why if you're looking through your data and you see file.path and file.name, you might be able to use file.name to get away without a wildcard covering the path, right? So be on the lookout. A lot of data sources that integrate with Elastic split things out into multiple fields for exactly this reason. There might be a smaller, more efficient field that you can use for your queries. Really quick note about query versus filter context. If you're new to Kibana, you probably don't know about this, and you don't need to know about this. That's my point here. But if you read a lot of documentation, you've probably run into query versus filter context in Elastic. They perform very differently. The good news is Kibana basically always uses filter context for us, which is the faster performing version. There are some edge cases, but for the most part, Kibana just figures it out under the hood for you. And this is confusing for new people because you have a query bar and a filter bar below it where you can add filters to. Both of those are executed as filters under the hood, right? So the good news is you really don't have to worry about it. If you read anything in the docs about it, that is all accurate if you're integrating with Elastic, if you're building an application around it. But for using Kibana, it's not really much of a concern. We pretty much covered this. Saving and recalling queries makes them available for reuse. All the configuration stays there. You can also put saved queries into a dashboard. So this is really handy if you have a dashboard with a bunch of overview visualizations, but you want to display the 10 most recent logs, right? As you're filtering down through the dashboard, it can be really helpful to have just a few raw logs to look at and see what exactly the data looks like, where a visualization might not help you. Real quick, there's not a whole lot to see here. I just want to point out autocomplete is actually pretty good in Kibana. It'll give you a list of field names that you can work from. It'll help you build your query, and it can even use values from the logs that you're looking at to build these queries. So it's very handy when you're starting out to be able to build a query this way. And as soon as we run it, that's going to limit our data to exactly what we're searching for. So pretty straightforward once we've covered the interface. Querying with KQL is really not too much of a concern. Most of the time, it does roughly what you expect it to. There's one edge case, though, that I really haven't found documented anywhere that trips up a lot of people, specifically using Kibana for security work, and that is file path queries. It's very common to look for logs that have a file path when you're looking for anything that happens under a specific subdirectory, which means you want an asterisk in your query. You want a wildcard. And if you have a space in that same path, you're stuck because a space requires quotes around the phrase so that it's not treated as two separate phrases, but a wildcard doesn't work within quotes. So we can get around this by escaping the colon and the backslashes with an extra backslash. And the secret here is there is a space in here. You don't have to escape it, right? I found this in a GitHub issue. It's kind of an edge case, but it's one that comes up a lot in security. You don't have to escape spaces in wildcard queries. If you're using a wildcard, there's no reason to escape it, and it won't work if you do. So This took us, the reason it's here is because it took us a long time to figure this out before we discovered how to search with spaces and wildcards. Next up, we're going to go into visualizations, right? So first off, a little bit of theory about kind of why we build visualizations, what they're good for and what they're not good at. They should be easy to understand and they should be useful for investigations, right? I see a lot of people try to use visualizations to discover new incidents or events. Alerting is a better tool for that. Whatever tool you're using for alerting, it's much more likely that you're going to remember to check your email or a Teams message or a Jira ticket than it is that you're going to log into Kibana every day to check a dashboard, right? So we can automate discovery of new events in most situations and leave the visualizations and the dashboards for investigating those alerts when they come in. Visualizations can be combined with filters and other visualizations. This is the concept of how dashboards work, right? A dashboard is a conglomeration of multiple visualizations. And when you select data within a visualization, it's going to affect all of the visualizations within that dashboard, right? So if you have one visualization that has a list of host names, when you filter by that host name, now all of your other visualizations are also only applying or only showing you data from that one host. Being able to click back and forth and add and remove filters is a really good way to see how your data is related, how different data points within your logs are related. We frequently find in the SOC that one user or one host is sending an abnormal number of a specific event code or DNS request. And so being able to pivot between multiple data points is really important to finding that kind of thing. And that concept of pivoting is something that we're going to cover a lot today. When people are working in your dashboards, users are going to want to pivot to other areas of Kibana. So they're going to naturally go back to Discover to look at raw logs. They might look around at other dashboards or go into the security app or there's a million different things that people could be doing in Elastic. So one of the things I want to encourage you is to reduce the friction to doing so, right? And one of the ways we can do that is by creating layers of dashboards that interlink with one another. When you add filters from a visualization, you do get the option, and I'll show you this in a minute, to pin those filters so that they follow you throughout Kibana. But we'll talk a lot about different ways you can reduce that friction to moving about in Kibana and even to external log sources to make your investigations more efficient and more productive. Next up, buckets versus metrics. This is something that I didn't know a lot about before I came to Elastic, and it's kind of a complicated, abstract subject, but it's important when you're building visualizations, right? So these are two, you can think of them kind of as opposite types of aggregations, right? A metric computes values from a set of documents. Usually we're trying to get to a single number that we can use in a chart to declare the height of a bar or where a point is placed on your graph. Most of the time in security, we're using count, which is the number of logs that matches your query, or unique count, which is the number of unique values in that field. If you're working with numbers, this is more common when using Elastic for other things, but there's a ton of math-based metrics that you can do if you need a maximum, median, minimum, percentile. But most of the time in security, we're using count and unique count. Buckets, like I said, are kind of the opposite. Instead of calculating one number from a group of data, we're splitting a data set into individual buckets, right? Individual groups. And they're split based on some criteria. So quite often we're doing this with terms or date histograms. I have an example here. This is a fairly basic bar chart that's showing us the count of logs received over time, right? And so the height of the bars here is a metric. It's counting how many logs were received within the time window. And the width of the bars, or how much time is covered by each bar, these are the buckets, right? So all of your logs from this whole time window get split up into individual windows of time. With the date histogram, you can do this fairly automatically. but then a metric is calculated for each one of those buckets. Right? And I think once we start doing a few examples, that'll kind of become more clear. Like I said, it's fairly abstract until you start working with it, and then you realize most of it is X versus Y axes that you're familiar with from drawing graphs in school. Kibana, excuse me. Been talking too much already. Kibana has a bunch of different visualization editors that we can use, right? So the top 5 here, these are, I'm going to say they're the most commonly used, but realistically, you're going to spend 99% of your time in the first 2, lens and aggregation-based visualizations, right? TSVB, Timeline, and Vega all have their place. This is just a chart showing you kind of which types of visualizations you can create with which editor. So you don't have to copy this down. You don't need to know it, but it does help to show the fact that you can't use just one of these visualization editors for everything and get away with it. They all have different strengths and weaknesses, and they're all useful for different things. That being said, most of you starting out are going to be using the lens editor. It's very simple. It's Elastic's flagship editor at this point. You can drag and drop fields. You can change the type of visualization on the fly, and it's going to update and help you do that. And it's really, really good if you're just kind of experimenting with different data. If you don't have a clear goal in mind, you just kind of want to see what different things look like. This is a very, very good tool for that. So I think, yeah, we'll go into a demo real quick here. To get to visualizations, we can go first to the visualized library and then create a new visualization. Like I said, we're going to start off here with the lens editor, and Elastic makes this very, very easy for us. So we can search for a field that we like, that we want to build a visualization on, and literally just drag it in here. And it's going to create a basic visualization for us. The really nice thing about Lens is if you don't know what type of visualization you need, it will let you change the visualization on the fly. And it's going to move your fields around so that they make sense for this given visualization. With most of the other editors, if you want to create a different type of visualization, you have to recreate the whole visualization. So we will go back to the vertical bar here. You do get some options here. You can change the number of values that are shown by your graph. So if we update this to 10, it's going to automatically update for us and show that data. One other thing I want to mention here, there is this other bucket at the end of the visualization, and you saw it in the pie chart as well. Basically, anything that doesn't fit into the top, in this case, 10 bars, is lumped together into this other bucket. Oftentimes, if your data set has very high cardinality, if there are a lot of different values, this other bar can just dwarf all of the other ones so that the visualization isn't usable. And this gives you the option to turn off that other bar and only show you the top 10. Like I said, you don't always need that. Oftentimes it's helpful to know how many other logs there are in your time window, but sometimes it gets out of hand and you can't use the rest of the visualization because of it. All right. Next up, we're going to talk about the other editor that you are most likely going to use at some point, the aggregation-based editor, right? This is how we originally created visualizations before Lens came about. It supports saved searches as input. You can also use data views. Everything here is very, very consistent, right? Each visualization acts the same way every time. And it's very easy to know and understand exactly what it's going to do. It is a little bit more cumbersome to use because you're setting everything up manually instead of dragging and dropping fields and letting it figure out for you. But the one big limitation that you may run into, similar to Lens, advanced styling, math, and multiple data sources are not supported. So Lens, you can do multiple data sources, but if you need advanced styling or math, you're going to end up in one of the more customized editors, right? So we'll give you a quick example of an aggregation-based editor, right? Once you click on the aggregation-based button, it's going to give you a list of all of your visualizations that you have available. And like I said, once you create the visualization, you're stuck with this type of visualization. If you want to recreate it as something else, you have to create a new one. So it's going to ask you what logs you want to pull. Logs-star is just going to show us all of our logs that are in various data streams. And just to start off with, it gives us very little to work with, right? It set our y-axis to the count of logs, right? So it's giving us 1 point for the total number of logs returned in the last hour. If we want to split this into individual points instead of just one, we can split the series here. And we'll do a date histogram just because doing values over time is very, very common. So a date histogram has an auto setting, so it's going to automatically divide up whatever time window you have selected and then adjust it when you change time windows. So now if we hit update, I split the series instead of the x-axis, and it looks crazy. Date histogram, there we go. So now it's going to give us a line chart split on the x-axis by time. Each one of these points represents a bucket or a window of time. And like I said, those are selected automatically. All of these aggregation-based editors work basically the same way. You can set up a y-axis with whatever metric you need, and then you split either the series or the x-axis or the chart based on some other criteria. They're all, like I said, very predictable, very easy to understand. Next up, we're going to talk about the TSVB editor. To be honest, this doesn't have a lot of common use cases in the security world, right? This isn't often needed, but there are a couple of edge cases where it can do something that no other editor can. So I wanted to show it off briefly, just in case you're looking for one of these things. You won't be able to do them in Lens or aggregation-based editors. It is powerful because it supports infinite aggregations. So the other editors all have a limit for the number of aggregations that you can use. It's based around time series data. And you do get some ability to do math with these, which can be really helpful if you need to compare data on different scales or you need to adjust your data before you actually visualize it. And lastly, this is one of those edge cases. The Markdown editor supports mustache templating, which is really cool. So if we go ahead and create a TSVB visualization here, by default, it's going to do something very similar to what we had in the last chart that we created. But we're going to change this. We're going to set max of destination.bytes. And then I'm actually going to create a second line that does exactly the same thing to show off this one feature that's really handy. So it's hard to see right now, but we've got two lines overlapping each other on this chart. If we expand this a bit, we might get a little bit more consistent line. Maybe not, but the one feature that this has that nothing else has is the ability to offset your data, right? So you get a bunch of detailed options here for moving things around, but this offset series time by, this is really handy if you have cyclical data that you want to compare hour by hour or day by day, right? See if it'll take my number here. Might have to ship it forward or shift it forward. haven't done them backwards before. Yeah. There we go. So what you're looking at here in this graph, this spike and this spike are actually the same, and we can see that a little easier if we change one of the colors. It is offsetting your data by an hour. If you have data that changes throughout the day, but is relatively consistent day to day, and you offset this by 1 day, you end up overlapping the 2 days worth of data. And you can see kind of how it's changed since yesterday or since last week, whatever time period you need. This can be really helpful in troubleshooting or catching changes. This is really cool if you get into a situation where you need it. And then secondly, we have the Markdown editor. Everyone's familiar with Markdown, but the one cool thing about this is we can include variables from our time series that we were working with, right? And it's going to automatically fill those in. This will, this is really cool if you need to build like a lot of detail into a small space in your dashboard. Like I said earlier, you can have an infinite number of aggregations. So you can theoretically have an infinite number of variables in your Markdown, which is really cool. Again, not something that you need every day or even commonly, but if you need it, this is a very cool feature. And then there is a dedicated text and Markdown editor. You don't have to use TSVB for this. It does not allow you to include aggregations or data, but it is very, very handy for creating navigation panels within your dashboard. So whether you're explaining what a dashboard does or creating a navigation pane, both of those things really reduce the effort required to interact with your dashboard and other related dashboards, right? So these are in some of the Elastic published dashboards, but I highly recommend thinking about what other dashboards you might want to move to from the one that you're on and creating a coherent navigation menu. It really reduces the resistance. It makes it easy to jump around and look at different data quickly. And if you pin your filters, you can keep them with you wherever you go in Kibana. So that's super useful. Very briefly, we're going to touch on Timeline and Vega. These are advanced editors. Timeline is specifically meant for viewing time series data. And you create these graphs by chaining functions together that define the data shown in the graph. It looks overwhelming at first. Overall, it's the easier of the two custom editors. You're not actually programming the chart itself. You're programming the data that's displayed by the chart. So you do have a lot of flexibility if you're trying to create specific line charts, if you need to do something special or operate on your data using various math functions. This is a good way to do that if you have the time to spend learning it. And lastly, Vega. This is the really complicated one. You are programming everything about the visualization in Vega. It means you have infinite customizability. You have full control over what data is loaded, what operations are done on the data before it's shown. But it, of course, has a very steep learning curve, right? It's the only option for Sankey, scatter, custom maps, and a bunch more advanced visualizations, but it takes a while to learn, right? This is not something that you're going to pick up on your first or second day. And even day to day, I don't use this a ton. We've used it a few times for specific jobs, but just something to keep in mind if you're looking to learn more about Kibana. This can be a really powerful tool if you know how to use it. Next up, we're going to talk about dashboards. This has come up several times throughout this webcast, but we're going to focus specifically on how to make quality, usable dashboards that can be interacted with and pivoted from. So, like we said earlier, users are going to move around a lot in Kibana. Think about creating layers of dashboards. So one way that we do this is by creating a user or a host investigation dashboard and link to it from other dashboards. So when you find a user of interest or a host of interest, you have that link available to you to jump to an overview of that host or user specifically. This works really well. It's very helpful for investigations if you're able to leverage it. It allows you to quickly get more information about something that you're already looking at without having to open up a new tab, go in, find the dashboard, and start your search over again. Controls are really useful for making a dashboard interactive, right? So we have a lot of options here, but the most common one that you're going to use is the options list. It's just a drop down that shows you the values given for a field, and you can select any of them. So we use this a lot to select a specific customer, a specific host, a specific data set. But you do have options for a range slider if you're using a lot of numeric fields. And the time slider can be actually pretty cool. Let's see if we can show that off quick. So we're going to have to clone this, I think. All right, here we go. So we've got a clone dashboard. This is a pre-built from Elastic. It's used to monitor your detection rules. That's not super important, but this right here is the time picker control, or time slider, I guess they call it. It seems very similar to the time picker in the upper right, but there is one useful difference here, and that is that you can shrink your window, right? So you're still covering 4 hours, but now your visualizations are all using just this one subset of the time. And then you can hit play. And what it's going to do is it's going to jump periodically between the different time windows. This can help you to spot changes over time, especially with a dashboard that you're monitoring quite often, right? Something that you're looking at or keeping open. It's nice to be able to look through the different time windows without having to click through manually. This also gives, some decent examples of the options list. Like I said, it's just a drop down that gives you values from that field and allows you to select them. Nothing that you can't already do by say clicking on a part of a visualization and having it add filters, right? So if we do this here, it's going to add a warning filter and only show us the warning logs, right? So you could create a data table with your top values for a given field, but the controls are just a little bit nicer way to do that without taking up a ton of space. All right, good. So we've got a little bit of time here to cover dashboard drill downs and pivoting. So dashboards have what's called panel interaction, which allows you, when you click on something like I just did in that last dashboard, it gives you an option to either add the filters or take some other action, right? You can do this on a whole panel, a series, or if you have a saved search in your dashboard, you can do it on that as well. And we'll demo this, but the drill downs give you the option to either go to a dashboard, open Discover, or open a URL, right? So we're starting to get into the URL templating that I talked about at the beginning of the webcast, right? It's really powerful to be able to go to a dashboard and apply filters that you're currently on when you click on some aspect of a visualization or a dashboard. But opening a URL is really, really powerful. Whether that URL is going to some other spot in Kibana or it's going to an external website, you can use templates, you can use the values that you're clicking on in the URL to have dynamic links to specific pages, either internal, external, or within Kibana. So my slides are slightly out of order here, but this is an example of what I'm talking about here. So I made up a couple of URLs here, but if you're traveling or if you're on a website and you look at the URL, that top one there is an example of what we would see in the browser when we go to the web page. And then the second link there is how we would put a template in there. So when this URL gets clicked from within Kibana, it's going to automatically populate the event.code variable with 4688 or whatever we're clicking on. This is really helpful for new analysts who need additional context. If you have a site that you can look up hashes on, something along those lines. And we also use it internally within Kibana. So that's what these second two examples are. This is a real example of how we use URL templating. When we get an alert, it generates a Jira ticket. And within that Jira ticket, we have this link that links back to the original detection dashboard, right? So it's quick and easy for us from the Jira ticket to open up the Kibana page for that rule so that we can actually, see what we're looking at without having to punch in the name, search for the rule, or search for the specific alert. There's tons of uses for this. And you get a few helpers with this, right? So even if your value in Elastic isn't exactly what you need for the URL, there are built-in handlebars helpers and Elastic supplied helpers. So these two links should help get you started to see what's going on there. But just for a couple of examples, you can encode values for URI. You can change date formats, format numbers, trim white space. There are a bunch of options here to kind of coax your data into whatever's required in the URL. And then we've got URL template variables. So depending on where the drill down was executed within a dashboard, right, you have global, context, and event variables. These, depending on which level your variables belong to, determine how much they're going to change, depending on if the user clicks a different visualization or a different series within a given visualization. Again, that link that I posted has some documentation about what's available here, and we'll go through a couple of examples. But just know some of these variables are going to be constant, as in they're the same across Kibana. The Kibana URL one is a good example if you're generating links back to your own Kibana instance. But the event values are probably more specifically useful if you're looking up parts of an event, right? Yeah, I think we can go ahead and do a demo here, and then we'll actually have some time for Q&A available. So we are in edit mode on the dashboard here, and we can go ahead and click create drill down here. Now, my lab does not have an enterprise license on it or a platinum license that's required for going to external URLs, but we can still kind of see you have the ability to go to a specific dashboard, which you can select here. You can choose to apply the filters from your origin. You can carry your date range over and choose whether or not you want it in a new tab. So I don't necessarily have a great dashboard to use an example with, but now when I click this, it's going to give me the option to either apply a filter or go to that drill down that I've added to this visualization. So this could be a dashboard, it can be a URL. And when I click it, it's going to carry me over to this other dashboard with the filter in place from what I clicked. So again, just another way that you can reduce friction for your investigations. I will also point out, let's get some data back in here. You can do URLs with specific fields for a data view, right? So if I look up host name here, I've got two values in here because I've got two machines reporting in. I'm going to add it to my chart and look through it. Again, this is getting a little bit in the weeds here if you're not familiar with Elastic, but for people who have been doing this a while, this is also been very helpful for us. So you can edit the data view field, and this allows you to make changes to how the field is displayed, right? You can change the label, you can set format, and if you set this to a URL, what's going to happen here is you can change both the linked URL and what it shows as. So more than likely, we're going to want to put value in here, which you can see updating on the right-hand side here is just keeping our static value, or I guess it's dynamic value, but it's keeping what we expect showing here. And then I can put in a template and use that value again. Once I do this and click save, now whenever I am in this this data view, now all of my host names are linked. This takes effect in the dashboards as well if you have a saved search or a data table. And now when I click this link, oh, I see it's keeping me within Kibana, but you can use these links to go to external websites or link to other parts of Kibana, which is really useful if you, we use this to link host names back to a host investigation dashboard. There's tons of uses for this. Again, my goal here is not to totally teach you how to use these 100%, but I want to make you aware of them so that next time you think, man, I wish this field could be linked, or I wish it was easier to transition between dashboards, that you at least know this is an option, can look up documentation and use it to your advantage. So with that, I think I will call Jason back in here. That's all the material I have to cover. If we want to do some Q&A, we can do that.
Q&A? Dave, well done.
Good job, Dave.
Done.
Well done, buddy.
Dave, go ahead and kill your screen just so that way our cameras can go up full. And then if you need to show something, we can always go back to it. Yeah. But hello, everybody. Yeah, I got a quick question for everyone who's listening. If you think Dave should teach a class on this, I'm not telling Dave he has to, but like if you were like, hey, I'd love to see a 4-hour, 8-hour, or 12-hour, or 16-hour class from Dave, just let us know in the chat. And like that's not why we do these, but every once in a while, like a whole bunch of people show up to a thing and we go like, is this something that people need to know? And then all of a sudden the person who gave it's like, yeah, I could write a class on this. Like, hey, we have a workshop tomorrow. It already sold out. And when I say sold out, it was $0. Filled up. So we're doing one tomorrow, 4-hour incident response workshop with Patterson Cake. And so like if Dave gets a good response from this, he might go like, what would a 4-hour workshop look like for Elastic? Not saying that you have to, Dave. I'm just saying, would there be a need for it? All right.
I'm going to give you a hint. There's hours 2 and 3 are already written.
Nice. Dude, that's awesome.
That's awesome.
Does Zelda know? Does she know what's coming?
I think I told her like 2 years ago when I started. She probably forgot now.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So if you already asked the question, go ahead and ask it again just to make sure that, because sometimes like Dave answers your question while it's happening. Prior to that, if you were here, if you already said hack it, we got you. Like we went through, we tagged everyone. It is a manual process. You do not have to do it again.
We're still working on it though. So if you don't see a change, it's because that's what we do on the back end when Dave was talking the whole time. So
yeah. So if you are here and you haven't said hack it yet, please let us know. Hack it inside Discord. And if you're like, what is that? For those of you that have been here multiple times, we keep track of how many webcasts you attend, and then we give you a special role. And then once you hit 10, you get put into a special channel where you can get a prize. And then when you hit 20 and 30, 40, and it ends at 50, we can't keep track anymore. But let us know that you're here.
Enough. Yes, 50. It's like a year. That's a year's worth of webcasts. So.
Yeah, and it only works in Discord. And if you've like, I've been to 72 of your webcasts. It is since we started in November, and it's in Discord. And you have to let us know you're here. That's how we keep track of you.
Yes,
it's not any other way.
All right. Fine.
So with all that out of the way, do you have a specific, Dave, question for you? Do you have a specific Docker Compose config you like using you could share?
I can get you a link. I used to maintain my own, and Elastic's Elastic published a Docker Compose that is actually phenomenal. It handles setting up certificates and SSL. The other thing I'll mention is if you're just trying to set this up just to play with it, I believe Elastic Cloud still has a trial subscription that you can sign up for. It's a really easy way to test it out. I think it's 30 days. You could try it out without worrying about how to set up the cluster in the first place.
For those of you not on Discord due to work, understand that we're looking for a different way to do that sometime in the future. So we didn't forget about you. We just don't have a mechanism for that yet. All right, Curtis, Richard wanted to know if get the slides. The slides are in the, if you look inside Zoom, there should be a resources section. Then there's like links and resources and other documents. If you go in there, you can go ahead and download them from inside Zoom. If you're on Discord, then take a look in the slides resources channel, and that's where they are. All right, Dave, what is the best way to ship in logs, Beats or Elastic Agent?
Yeah. So Beats have been around for a very long time. There are some things that you can only ship with Beats. However, Elastic's focus is on agent going forward. I would say 95% of their development towards new log sources and updates to existing ones are being done on the agent side of the house. So if you can get away with it, agent is going to be much more well supported, in my opinion.
Just a quick
Not those
comment.
kind of beats flying here, but very funny.
A quick comment from Jeff said, I'd love a 4-hour class. I use Elastic daily and need to know more about watchers, transforms, and advanced rule creation.
Very cool. Yeah.
I thought Elastic had a dedicated security application.
It does. And that's where you're going to manage if you have hosts running Elastic Defend and any detection rules that you're covering. We didn't really go over any of that. In my experience, you're still going to be searching your data when you work in security, right? So that was the goal of getting that initial exposure. Most of the work that you do in the security app is related to rules and defend. And when you're investigating those rules, you're going to come back here to discover and to dashboards.
Yeah. Can this be run natively on Windows, Linux without Docker?
It can be. Windows can be a little bit tricky. And I don't necessarily have a good guide for you. The Elastic docs are good. It does run natively on Windows. Elasticsearch and Logstash are Java-based, so there's no real issues there. You're going to find a lot more documentation for Linux, though. But yeah, our primary cluster does not use Docker. It's just an easy way to get a simple test cluster up and running quickly.
Troy, did you have any questions that you were capturing?
There was a lot on like, how do I get started?
Mm.
Outside of the fact that you're here at the webcast, like getting started with Dave, like any in your class, maybe potentially coming soon, right? There was a bunch of those, right? Like, want to learn more. How do I get involved? Some community stuff, you know, those areas. So if there's any like, I guess, you know, common resources that can help, you know, folks getting started.
Yeah, definitely. Elastic's documentation is very good. It can be a little bit cumbersome to move around in, but they've got really good coverage. It's going to tell you what you need to know if you're standing stuff up. If you're just wanting to work in Elastic and you're not managing it, my best advice is spin up an example cluster, whether that's Docker or Elastic Cloud, whatever works for you, or native. And just start playing around with it, right? As security professionals, we quite often have a good idea of what we want to see, what we want to show. So it's a matter of playing around with Kibana until you figure out how to do that. Yeah, other than my class, like I said at the beginning, there's not a lot of training or documentation out there for just general Kibana use. Some of the Elastic published docs are going to be helpful. Some of them are going to be too in-depth for that kind of use.
This is my question for you.
Yeah.
What's your favorite query language supported by Elastic?
That's a good question. I hate them all equally, I guess. I think ESQL is going to be very cool. It's brand new. It's still not ready for prime time. If any of our analysts are listening to this, do not go use it. It's broken. it ruins clusters. So be careful, but it has a lot of cool new functionality that none of the other languages have. So playing with it in a lab is
And for those that have like used Splunk and haven't used Elastic, would that probably be the best like bridge for or bridging the gap as far as for going from Splunk to Elastic?
I think so. Yeah, EQL is also pretty powerful. I don't have a lot of experience with Splunk to know which one's more similar. But yeah, I mean, KQL is so easy to use. There's really no advanced functionality, so you can figure it out pretty quick. And then your choice when you move on from there is either EQL or ESQL.
Yeah, just for you all to know that Dave and I have had many discussions, and when I start like going after things with regular expressions, Dave starts getting very scared, and rightfully so.
Your regex strings should not be 100 characters long, Troy. That's
Oh, I can write a regex to shorten that up.
Yeah. Dave, I would encourage you, like, when you have time later today or tomorrow, to go through the chat in Discord and see some of the questions that we missed, and just go ahead and hit reply to them and answer some of those questions, because some of them are fantastic and some of those will help you flesh out the remaining part of the class that you're thinking about putting together, or a workshop.
definitely.
Is your comic like where so in the future is the comic, all those, it's like a password that is password protected, so you're gonna have to crack the password. So the future is 6-letter characters, 6 characters password, and so those words will be unlocked by you in a CTF. So just imagine like a bunch of hackers put together a graphic novel. So the graphic novel has CTF all woven through it. From the moment you get to the Kickstarter page, let's just say there's a CTF. Okay. All right. So Dave, we got a lot more questions, but I want to wrap up with you. So for the people who need to go, they only have 1 hour for this. So if you had to sum up everything from today in one final thought, what would it be?
I think if anybody watches Adam Savage's videos, right, he's a maker. He does a lot of shop type YouTube videos now after doing Mythbusters. And he talks a lot about resistance to flow state, right? And that's kind of my main takeaway. You want to lower the barrier to that flow state where you're just working, you're digging, you're finding what you need to find, and you're not spending a bunch of time being frustrated, opening new tabs, redoing searches because you lost one in the mess of tabs. Whatever you can do to reduce that resistance is valuable.
Dave, thank you. This was your first Black Hills Information Security webcast. You did fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Do you want to know how many people were here, or do you want to throw out
how many people were here?
Well, we had, okay, well, I'm going to give you actual. You can talk amongst yourself.
So if this is your first time here, thank you so much for joining us today. We do this all the time. Next Thursday, we actually have Patterson Cake's going to do one on incident response. We have a 4-hour workshop tomorrow on incident response. It's completely full, but we have another date that we're doing on April 5th. We do this every single Thursday. So if you have already registered today, you're going to keep getting emails from us. We do not email about services or products. We don't do that to you because we know that you would unsubscribe like I would, right? Like if I get those emails, I unsubscribe. We don't want you to unsubscribe. We want you to keep coming back and be a part of this community, which is why we do Hack It. So when we do Hack It, we want you to just break the ice on posting in Discord. So that way, what if you have questions? Ask questions, answer questions, be a part of this online community of people helping each other. Because if we all work together, we can be better together. So with that, we're going to stick around for a few minutes. We'll do some rapid fire questions with Dave. If you got to go, completely understand. And so we'll see y'all next time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Well, okay. So 1,800 people registered, which is, well, it's a lot. And about 1,050 showed up live. Who are still here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's very good. It's good. People want it. People want Elastic. So
Well, good.
excited for that class.
Yeah, should be fun.
Yeah, were you nervous? You seemed super chill, very calm.
Very chill.
You said it was less than 5,000 people, and I obviously spent a good amount of time as a musician. So
Sure.
I'm okay. If there would have been 20,000 people, I would have been really nervous.
Oh, we need more help if there's 20,000 people showing up to this. That's awesome.
Dave, do you use LinkedIn? Someone asked.
I have one. I do not use it.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the guitars that are hanging up behind you?
Yeah, so all the way on this side here, this is an Epiphone. Oh, look at that camera zooming in.
Nice. Woo.
Zoom
Oh,
out.
wow.
I don't know how to zoom it out. Oh man.
Point
I
the
know, I
other
don't know
way.
how to
Yeah.
point this way. I don't,
Yeah.
That's really funny.
I don't know. It's
That's it. We're
that's
stuck.
hilarious.
Ryan,
I
can you
think
Well-
it's an
let us know?
upside down L. Try that.
An upside down L.
I think he's making fun
No,
of you.
maybe that's not it.
No,
I think
I
he
don't
is.
trust
Do this.
Ryan at all. Don't
Do
listen
that.
to Ryan.
Do that.
Hey, that
worked.
works.
Oh,
And
you
it's,
mean a backward? You mean an inverted
Oh
L?
man.
I guess.
Whew.
All right, so
What?
I am. It's a new
Do
camera.
this.
Okay, I don't know how to work it.
Whew. So you have an Epiphone?
Yeah, I'm not going
Yeah.
to point to any of
Don't
them.
do that.
So starting on my side here, there's an Epiphone
There.
electric.
And then that one.
The next one over is a Fender P bass that I got from the bassist from our band. He just gave it to me because he wanted me to learn bass. And then the next two is a Taylor and I believe it's a Samick, my first ever acoustic. But that
Is-
Taylor 814 is my baby. That's what I play 90% of the time.
Nice.
And yeah, I see somebody noticed it. The Vox AC30 down on the bottom there. I picked that up for an absolutely ridiculous price used at a music store.
Nice. How long have you been playing?
Probably 14 years.
Okay.
Something like that.
Nice.
Yeah. Whatever camera you have, Dave, I need to get. It's fantastic.
It's the
I-
Tiny 2. Ryan recommended it.
Oh, geez, Ryan.
It does. It looks really good.
It
It's-
does.
It does look
It
really
looks-
good.
yeah.
Makes our razors look pretty terrible.
Oh.
Fine.
I listened to Jason when I bought my equipment.
Well, I was trying to save some money back then, Troy.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. We were small.
I didn't know if you were going to keep showing up to these.
Yeah.
That's right. That's true. Too small.
Well, now that we got Dave this camera, like, all right, Dave,
Yeah.
when's your next webcast?
Nope.
Got to work it off.
Yeah,
Gotta
we'll
work on
see.
All right, so some other questions coming in. Is option to see password and log or convert base 64?
Generally speaking, you don't want passwords in your logs. I would recommend against it. If you have a field that's base 64, you might be able to edit it with a painless script, similar to the way that I added that URL. But yeah, my general recommendation is don't keep passwords in your logs if you can help it.
Someone said the OBS bot website unresponsive. Hug of death.
Oh,
Oh.
really? Wow. Good job, guys. Well done.
Nadine wants to know.
I think that
did
was
miss
a
it?
joke.
Okay,
Did I
good.
miss it? I'm on Pacific time. Yes, Nadine, you did miss it. But
important.
like all of our webcasts, should be on YouTube within minutes. And then Ryan's got to go in and cut out the pre-show banter and some of the stuff at the end. But if you get there quick, you get pre-show banter. If that's what you want.
Talked about some crazy stuff.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's take a look. Does BHIS use timelines? Is it
we
okay
do.
to say this?
Yeah, we
Okay.
do. We primarily use them as, you can link them onto alerts, which is really handy when you get an alert in that security application. And my next webcast, whenever that is, will cover the security app, but you can link to timelines from specific alerts and have templated values in there that allow you to kind of have like a pre-made search done and linked from your alert. I don't think we use it a whole lot for general searching unless we need to use EQL for something. I believe timeline is still the only way to manually run EQL at this point.
There was a question on integrations, specifically integrating with like MISP and Security Onion. I'm assuming Security Onion's instance of Elastic. So I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about integrations or.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I worked with Security Onion specifically, and I think things have changed a lot there. There are definitely FileBeat threat intel modules. I don't know about the status of the agent ones, but yeah, I believe there is a MISP integration, right, that you can link directly in.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the FileBeat modules will allow you to query several different sources, whether you have paid services or there's some free ones that you can pull in to get you started as well.
Someone asked us why we cut out pre-show banter from the recordings. It's because even though we're fantastic, what happens is like I want to learn about Elastic, and like you show up like, oh, getting started in Elastic, and then you hit play, and then all of a sudden you're like, what is this?
I mean, the short answer is John told us to. That's really, he's like, you got to cut that. You guys are great, but yeah.
He was like, I went to a video to learn something, and I had to wait for you guys to just
stop talking.
Okay.
Okay.
So pre-show banter happens live. It doesn't stay in the recording. So even though we know you love it.
Thank you. You guys are
We don't know why.
Maybe you could take the pre-show banter and move it at the end.
Yeah, there's been
No,
people
it's just
want like
it's
its own
fine.
playlist, and it really
Yeah.
is just you got to be here for it live, and so just show
well,
up early.
that's a good point. You know,
Yeah.
if you're not there for it live, it's like Vegas, right? It stays there. And
It should stay.
it just stays there.
Just stay.
All right, Dave, any resources for detection engineering?
Your con.
Look at the Sigma project. I don't know that I would recommend automatically converting all of their rules, but it's a really great repository of example rules that you can work with and move into Elastic.
Also, we have 50 people who are like following
Thanks, guys.
the Future Is
Wow.
series, which is about hackers in the future, like 30 to 40 years from now, hacking the technology that's coming, because hackers going to hack regardless of the time period.
And there's little codes kind of sprinkled throughout the entire comic.
What?
Oh,
All right, Dave, last question. Have you built your own Elastic integrations?
Yes and no. I have not actually published agent integrations yet. We have a couple that we use in-house, and I haven't really polished them enough to submit. We have a lot of custom Logstash and FileBeat pipelines that we use to bring data in, and some Elastic ingest pipelines. But yeah, we haven't published any integrations yet. I think we're going to in the future, though.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Deb, Troy, Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Ryan, thanks for always making sure this works and so that we can do this for the community. If this is your first time here, thank you for joining us and spending time with us. If this is your 50th, 100th, 200th time coming, thank you so much. Like we whenever we go to a conference, we get a chance to meet you, or you come to Wildwood's Hack and Fest or something. Like, we are humbled by the fact that you show up and continue to show up, and we absolutely appreciate you being out there. We appreciate you sharing this with other people. We appreciate you inviting your coworkers to come to these. We hope it's educational, we hope it's fun, and we hope it's in a way that you like to learn so that you want to keep coming back. And so if you ever need anything, or if you have a topic that you would like us to cover, you can always let us know, and we'll put it out to our testers and like, anyone want to cover this? But for the most part, we're always looking through Discord to see, is there common topics? Is there things that people want to learn? And then we take that back to our testers and we're like, hey, we're seeing this. But for the most part, if you're already in Discord, you're already in Discord, so you can help each other out. Because what's cool is we have contributors, we have community leaders, we have people who don't work at Black Hills, who are part of this community, who make sure that you get the knowledge that you need. Because it is better to be together, and it is scary to go alone. And so let's not do that. Go alone. Let's all be together.
You're here.
All right, Ryan, kill it with fire, Ryan.
Guys.
Kill it,
See you
Ryan.
next week.
See you, everybody.
Bye.